multiplayer series. This episode we'll be covering spawning objects. So first you're going to want to go to your network manager script, and that's where we'll be doing most of our work for this episode. Okay, first we're going to make our request spawn function. So this is how players will request spawning an object. So we'll go at RPC, any peer, call local, reliable, right? You should be used to that one by now. And then we'll go func request spawn object. Okay, and so they are going to send over a dictionary we'll call spawn args, and this will be of type dictionary, like I just said. Then in here, we will go var request ID is equal to multiplayer dot get remote sender ID. Okay, and we'll say if not spawn args dot has resource path, which will be just the path we send over the network to the resource. We'll just do a push warning and say no resource path provided. Okay, and then return, because we can't spawn at nothing. Okay, now we'll go var resource path is equal to spawn args resource path. I hate using all these strings, I'm sorry. If not, resource loader dot exists. So we'll check if this resource exists. So if they request something that doesn't exist, don't spawn it, I guess is the gist of this. And we will also check resource path dot begins with, and I'll just say type string so we get the IntelliSense. And then we'll say res //. So first I'm just gonna do the whoops. Okay, so why did I do this rather than the validators that I'd done earlier? This I want to be our absolute bare minimum checks. Check that the resource exists. Otherwise, why bother sending the spawn request to all the clients? Check that we're even requesting a spawn. Makes sense. And I don't want the players to be able to spawn anything outside of the Godot folder structure. That makes sense? I do want, if you have a production game, I would add more checks, and we will add a proper validator to do that later. But this is the bare minimum for security I feel comfortable having. So let's continue. So we will push warning again, invalid resource path, sent resource path, and then return again. Okay, now let's do our validators. Oh no, wait, I've got another one. We should actually get rid of this string check, and we should just check if it's a string first. So if resource path is not string, then we'll push warning. The resource path is not a string, and return. Got it. Okay, now we've got all those. Those are our basic checks done. And now we'll say if validate. We got to make our validator at the top here. Let's scroll up at the top. Okay, let's put our validators here. Var validate spawn callable, and this will be of type callable. I also, over my validators, I like to put what the arguments of this is going to take in, since you can't really, I couldn't find a way to specify what arguments this callable is going to take, so I'm going to just put this here, that it takes requester ID of type int and spawn args of type dictionary. Okay, that's just so that when you hover over this, let's see if it'll do it down here. So if validate spawn callable. So if it's set, see, takes requester ID of type int and spawn args type dictionary, and then we'll say if validate spawn callable dot call requester ID and spawn args. That way you'll have all the information to determine whether this player can spawn this thing. So if this returns true, we will spawn object. So spawn object RPC and then return. Now I am going to go down here and say else. So if it's not set, we will just do the typical spawn object RPC, so that for testing, we don't need to have too much security. So now let's make this spawn object RPC. Okay, stop and think for a second about this RPC header tag thing. This part here, what would you do for your spawn RPC? So in this one, we have any peer, call local, and reliable. what would you do for your spawn RPC? All right, pause the video, think about that, write your own, and then come back and we will write it together. Okay, hopefully you did that. I'm going to go at RPC, and we are going to do authority because we only want the server to be able to spawn objects. We will do call local because we want them to be spawned on the server and the client. And then we will also do reliable because we want it to show up. Cool. Now I'm going to go func spawn object, or should I say network? Network spawn object. Okay. Now this is going to take in a few things. So it's going to take in the owner ID of type int. So who we want to own this object. So this someone could maybe call something on behalf of somebody else at some point. I don't know. Probably shouldn't do that, but I'm going to give you the option. I don't want this to be too opinionated. And I'm going to say spawn args and of type dictionary. Cool. And we are going to go into the function and say var resource path is equal to spawn args resource path. Cool. And we'll say, again, we'll do some of our basic checks here. We'll have to do if resource path is not string. Then what we'll do is do the push warning, the resource path is not a hit, and we will return. We're doing these checks here because this function, this request spawn object, isn't the only way to call this. You can call this anywhere basically from the server. So this is kind of to save you from yourself and help you debug down the road. Okay, so we'll say if not resource loader dot, I'm just going to copy, actually. I'm not going to type this out again. There we go. Just because this file exists on the server doesn't mean it exists on the client. And again, we want to just be sure that we always have this because we do not want people spawning any file from your system. That is just a security nightmare. And now we'll go back up to the top and make another callable just in case the clients want to validate their spawn. So we'll say var validate. Do we need, actually, I don't think we need, do you think we need another callable here? I don't think so. Not for now. If we come down the road and feel like we need it later, we'll add it later. But for right now, I think we'll just call our function spawn object, which we'll make later, spawn object. Okay, now let's send this RPC. So network spawn object dot RPC there, and copy this and put it down here. And now we don't need these return statements because we aren't gonna get the errors if they're not there anymore. Okay, let's scroll up here and get out of the RPCs area. I like to keep my RPCs together. So what we are gonna be doing here is we're gonna make an overrideable function. So this function is supposed to be overwritten depending on the needs of your game. But this is gonna give you just the absolute bare minimum spawn functionality to work out the box, and then you will want to override this as you add your own spawn args and stuff like that. So here we go with func spawn object, and we'll take in a owner ID, type int spawn args dictionary. We already did our checks here. Now we don't need to do them here. So we'll go var resource path of type string is equal to spawn args resource path. Cool. Now we'll make our object var object is equal to load resource path. Copy this dot instantiate. Now we're going to make sure that this object's instance is valid. So we'll say if not is instance valid object. So if it's not valid, we will push error, and then we'll say we failed to instantiate, and then s, and then percent resource path. So we failed to instantiate it, and we will return. Now we'll say if object is network object, because maybe we want to spawn things across the network that aren't network objects, but generally speaking, 99% of the time, we'll do network objects, but occasionally we may not. So if it is a network object, we'll say object dot resource path, which we will add now. We'll make a variable here, var resource path is equal to, or is of type string, equal to object dot resource path is equal to resource path. Object dot owner ID is equal to owner ID, and object dot spawn. Let's make a variable for spawn args. Our spawn args. So these are so that we can spawn it back identically if a player connects late. So the server will look at these spawn args and everything and go, ah, this player connected late. Let's spawn these details onto their client. So we'll go spawn args is equal to spawn args. Okay, now we'll go get tree dot current scene dot add child object. Okay, so this is the bare minimum functionality. In the spawn args, we could include things like position, rotation, color, outfit stuff. We could do so many different things with these spawn args, but since we don't know the specifics of your game, right now we are making this generic, and then you can override this later when you inherit or extend this network manager class. Both this network object and the network manager are meant to be extendable. They're not supposed to be used on their own, if that makes sense to you. I hope it does. I'll do an episode, I think episode 10. I'll be showing you how to do that with a network object. And yeah, in this series, this is the only overridable function I'm going to have in the network manager where it's meant to be overridden. So I'm not going to bother too much with overriding the network manager. Now, just for fun, I am going to do a request helper or spawn request helper so that it helps you make a spawn request. So I'm going to say request spawn helper. And this is going to take a resource path of type string, and it's also going to take a dictionary of args. So it'll be args, and this will be of type dictionary. Okay, and here we are going to just do some basic checks again that we've done a million times already, just to make sure things work. Oh, and we got to call our spawn object here. Spawn object. Whoops. Owner ID spawn. I almost forgot this, but I'm just gonna copy these checks into here, and then we will go. Actually, this is also going to return a dictionary. No, it's not. Whoops. I'm making up my mind here. Also, I want this to be empty so you don't have to add spawn args if you want to. So we'll say var dict of type dictionary will equal resource path, and then we will do args will be args. There we go. We've made our dictionary. Now we'll just call our RPC request spawn object dot RPC ID, and we will send this only to the server, and we will pass in our dictionary. Cool. Now we are requesting our spawn object. Now, whenever a player connects, we want to spawn our objects to them. So any objects that have been spawned, we want to go and spawn them again on new connections. Otherwise, they won't have them. So let's scroll up to this on peer connected function that's turning quite large. Okay, so if we make it past these checks here, we are going to want to, we already are doing it here where we've got our network objects for each player. We're looping through them and initializing them. So what we'll do is go and say if network object dot resource path dot is empty, then what we'll do is this, because if we have a network object that already exists in the scene, then it won't have a resource path. So we want to be able to handle network objects that just already exist in scenes and ones that are spawned later. And then we'll go elif, or I'll just do else. And then, so since it has a resource path, we will go network spawn object here ID. Actually, it's an RPC. RPC ID. So we'll send this to the peer that just connected. So we'll send this to the peer ID so that everyone doesn't spawn duplicates. Then we'll go network object dot object ID. No, owner ID. Then we will do the network object dot spawn args here. Cool. Then we will go network object dot initialize network object. We can call these one after the other, and we'll also send this to the RPC ID here ID. We can do this one after the other because these are reliable functions, so they will show up in order on the client. And this will be, of course, network object dot owner ID, and then we will get the transforms. Network object dot get transforms. So that should just about cover everything we need to do for spawning objects. We'll be testing this in the next episode, where we will build a menu where we'll get to select our characters when we connect to the game. All right, stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. Bye.